I've been on a bit of a health journey for the last few years, and I've been on and off medication for hormones. And every time I go on medication, it solves a lot of my day-to-day problems like drive, concentration. But it seems that it feels like I lose a certain sense of subtlety to deeper levels of being. And then I come off the medication and I feel like I deepen into feeling just subtler levels of consciousness, but I lose out on what I think would make me like a functional human. And it feels like I'm in a choice between normal life and spiritual life, and there's a lot of conflict there. And part of my issue is I don't know if this is just a limiting belief that I'm telling myself that I cannot be spiritual and on medication. But my intuition says that something about the energy body is off when I'm on it. And I just want to know what your insights are into how what we put into our bodies affects the prana, and is it possible to awaken if we are on certain medications?
In other words, very fitting topic. How does the body fits into this picture? How can the body affect anything here, right? If consciousness is omnipresent, if awareness is all there is, how can that be impeded by any functioning of the body? So the paradox is already there, present. And yet at the same time, it is through the body, through the instrumentality of the body, that this experience of beingness, of being in the world, as the world, is being essentially enjoyed. So this paradox is not yours nor mine. It has been around for a long time. How the body fits into the picture. In fact, this is where, in a way, spirituality or the spiritual circles had begun to stumble some years ago, because the role and place of the body was ignored, purposefully, deliberately ignored. As in the earlier morning discourse when we talked about, right, as part of that continued build-up introduction, where we defined the scene when we talked about the yoga, how it is practiced in the West, right, non-duality, where the body was kind of out of the picture, because you are not the body. As the process of reduction goes, that neti, not this, whether you're familiar with it or not, but there is this process of subtracting versus deducting versus going through the peeling of the layers. In that neti approach, not this, right, of course, the body is being transgressed to subtler realms of prana, until even that is being then inevitably renounced, just as in the story of Nishiketa from the Upanishads. I don't know if some of you are familiar, but to make that as an example here, it's a fitting example, because Nishiketa was just a cow herd boy who was, inadvertently, as in all those stories, he became the disciple. And he wanted to learn the highest truth, right? But there was this gradations of how he was introduced to it. So he would contemplate and he would come and ask, right? So what is the subtlest? And very quickly he realized that, that it's not this, because the body in a sleep is very differently experienced, so I must be not the body, What about my thoughts, right? Well, there are times when I don't have thoughts and yet the sense of being is there, sense of presence, right? The sense of I-amness is there. So therefore he very quickly, but he was a good boy, he would just go back and ask. He would go back and say, no, it's not that. What about this? Until he came to the level of prana, right? Vital air. This story is simply said to illustrate that this is a healthy process of self-examination, so as to relax that membrane of tension, of identity. But when it comes to the much messier process, what awakening represents, then different perspectives are required, including different approaches and at times different methodologies. Because it is through the instrumentality of our nervous system that we can really mark the process. There's no way otherwise to tell at all if we evolve. It is through that refinement which you spoke to earlier, that you feel that when you are on medication that is lacking. Refinement of perception, something is being dampened, as if the windows of perception are getting smokier, foggier, right? Because that's how the medications of all kinds works, because it never addresses anything at the root level. It can only work at that level where we are less capable of perceiving less. So in other words, as with all painkillers, short-term painkillers, that it needs to work immediately, versus long-term medications which meant to assist to some balance at the hormonal level. How is it achieved? It's not achieved through bringing harmony into the physiology. It's achieved through making certain aspects of it less acutely perceiving what otherwise is there, causes maybe certain disturbance, certain age, brings the age, like the fluctuations in hormones, for example. So it's almost like we could now give analogy to your man, right? In a man's body, male body. I'm not going to go into this whole paraphernalia of we'll leave it for later. But it's like we know that female physiology is much more prone to fluctuations, hormonal fluctuations, due to monthly cycles, let alone the phases of pregnancy or breastfeeding, because the body is transformed more acutely. Woman's body is much more responsive and responsive to any changes. Not that we guys are dumb completely, right? And not sensitive enough to these cycles. Of course we're not. We are. But in the female physiology is designed in such a way that it is much more subjected to these hormonal fluctuations. Imagine if women would be treated against these hormonal fluctuations. Like woman would be treated for being a woman. which is not too far-fetched, maybe, because we kind of leading to that kind of like androgynous, artificial intelligence friendly like, kind of ideal. Whatever that means, I'm not quite sure, and I'm restraining myself to go there. But treating women for what this essentially very, very complex responses to the cycles of the moon and so forth would be almost, a strange thing to do. And yet, there are treatments, of course, in holistic medicines and holistic systems. There are plenty of ways of how to help ladies who are out of balance by applying certain, proved by time, right, methodologies. It is present in Chinese medicine, it is present in Ayurveda, right? It's not true that some women have to suffer painful monthly cycles, these cramps. It is simply because certain disalignments on a very, very long base took place. Likewise, it is not true that women cannot be treated for that baby blues after giving birth because it's a part and parcel. No, it can be. It can be systemically assisted. It's the most powerful movement when the baby is born, which was part of you, suddenly no longer part of you. A huge part, which took 9 months under the heart to grow. So imagine what it is like in terms of Ayurveda. It's a gigantic disturbance of Vata. And yet, if Vata is managed throughout, and especially just before giving birth, and especially right after, then all this, what otherwise associated with Vata disturbances, of which the baby blues syndrome is precisely a symptom of, you see? It's not because woman suddenly gives birth and now she kind of lost in a sense of like, in this melancholy. It's a Vata. Why am I saying about this? I'm saying about this by giving this example through female physiology, but why do you think that this is not possible to affect the way our hormones function through bringing the adjustments somewhere within through these holistic approaches, rather than resorting to a quick fix of the medication? Maybe, I know I don't want to kind of sounding now, because it kind of in danger of sounding critical, like maybe if you attended a non-dual teachers retreat, right? A less responsible non-dual teacher will tell you, well, it doesn't matter really, because it's only body, it's going to die, it's going to go anyway. Who gives who cares? Why do you even worry about it? There is truth to that, undeniably, isn't it? Why to hold on to something that is to perish here? Contemplating one's mortality, it's the most vital thing to do. Contemplating one's impermanence as the body, what gives joy, joie de vivre to every day. Because it doesn't allow the sameness to set in. Being aware that this is a transient affair, it's a wonderful thing. Here and then gone. Just a breeze, a little lingering fragrance left after that favorite incense. What was his name? Oh, and the legacy doesn't matter. It's wonderful to contemplate on this. But there is also something which is down to earth, practical. You want to enjoy all that, what the instrumentality of being in the body, as the body as well. Body has not been fully rehabilitated. No. The body has not been rehabilitated. We do not know what human being is. We have not a clue. We're only standing at the frontier now of what it truly represents. So really, we're standing at the frontier of a new spirituality. Mark my words. It's not that I'm not talking about latest book by Deepak Chopra, Meta-Human. I'm not talking about Joe Dispenza, You Are Placebo. No, I am talking about these books, believe me, yes, but I'm not talking about these books now. I'm not talking about what potential human being has. What unlimited potential and otherwise potential, no. We still don't know what human body is right now. Without any potential, what it is right now. So therefore, half philosophies are born. So, as I said many times, just as the 20th century brought revolution into the field of spirituality through the breakthroughs in quantum physics, in the 21st century, the revolution will be completed by the breakthroughs in neuroscience. But not at the level of that examination from the platform of the old paradigm of studying human being as under the, any scope, macroscope, microscope, this scope, It's not about measuring the activities even. Because I had some discussions with people in the field, scientists in the field, with regard to this. And guess what? There is a limitation to what we can measure. The effects and impacts of meditation have already been studied. In fact, in depth studied. The studies were concluded at the end of the late 60s, throughout 70s. In transcendental meditation movement alone, 600 papers available of these studies. Because back in the days, that was very important to validate that this is not some kind of new age or old age methodology, make believe, that it had to have that scientifically validated platform, that this indeed impacts our state of well-being. How? Have a look. And it's not just the EGG we're speaking about here, or EEG, or whatever, like an unpronounceable long word, right? Whatever, like that's the one. We're not even talking about measuring the heart rate. We're not talking about measuring the brain activity, what waves are dominant. Because this is still translates into the functioning of the physiology. We cannot measure the subtler processes. This is what the scientists lament. That we cannot measure what really happens at the subtler level. In other words, there is no technology today to simply measure the activity of what is so obviously spoken of in relation to subtle body. See? So therefore my response to yesterday's evening question on the association, the connection between Kundalini and that V nerve, right? What is it? Vagus? Vagus. Vagus. Not Las Vegas. Vagus nerve. Because I remember Vegas. I remember Las Vegas, but not Vagus. So there's no connection. Why? Because Kundalini cannot be reduced to a single nerve. In the same way here. So the long answer, to make short, the choice is yours. Choice is yours. You have to make that decision. You have to make that choice. You see? Yes, I'm not a proponent of medications. I'm not even a proponent of macrodosing. So, I'm kind of cutting my career short in Silicon Valley. Because that's the coolest thing to do today. Right? That, be a superwoman, microdose. You know what microdosing is? It's taking in small dosages that what otherwise, sets you off. Whatever that is, LSD, but in a very small dosages. Not like in the 70s, popping a pill and then finding your way home or being delivered by caring friends. But taking a very small amount, which apparently accelerates your nervous system. And so people in Silicon Valley swear by it. A lot of people are on it. So if you want to be like this Agent Natasha, right, in The Black Widow, or what's her name in Luc Besson's film, Lucy. Have you watched Lucy? That's the answer that, microdosing. But I'm not at all speaking for that. And when I was asked about this just last year in California, my answer was predictably similar to the position that I took some times ago. Why? Because, again, from the holistic perspective, there are certain universal qualities that are in charge. Therefore, we spoke about Samkhya philosophy earlier on today, and I mentioned the two main aspects, right? Two main qualities, or two main categories rather, Purusha and Prakriti. So if you understand that Purusha and Prakriti, Prakriti comes from Purusha according to Samkhya, but Purusha is unaffected by Prakriti, not involved. That's why the system is dualistic. Prakriti then in turn operates through three principal energies. That of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. These are principal qualities of nature. Everything is achieved through these qualities. If you don't need to be scholar of Indian philosophy, and if you are more lean towards scientific understanding, you can view these as major forces in nature, major universal forces. Electromagnetism, weak and strong interactions, and gravity. So this is the picture of what Sattva, Rajas and Tamas represent. Sattva is that what keeps everything in equilibrium, that electromagnetism of everything, that which sets the possibility of everything to coexist in the first place. Tamas represents the opposite of that. It's gravity. It's the cohesiveness of structure. But at the same time, of course, it's that what slows everything down. It's stupor. It's ignorance, darkness from the emotional point of view, mental point of view. And Rajas is that what moves, what gives motion to everything. Without Rajas, there's no movement. That interaction, you see? So, these principal energies are very, very important to understand what they are, because everything we eat, everything we take in any form, carries these qualities. There is not a single plant on this planet, not a single substance that is not a minute composition of these three qualities. Just as Ayurveda deals with doshas, which is elemental order of 5 great elements composed of mixture. Samkhya philosophy, which is the platform of Ayurveda, deals with primordial forces, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So anything that we take as consciousness-altering substance already tamasing at a given and cannot be sattvic. You see? It's already tamasic in essence. So therefore, it will inevitably drag the system down after the excitement. It gives that boost, but then the system collapses. It needs another reboot. again, and then it needs again another reboot. Whereas yogic wisdom and yogic literature repeatedly speaks of the importance of maintaining and building the quality of sattva. The more sattva is, the more there is balance in our life. The less, the opposite is the result. So therefore, sattva is always given preference. At some point, to the religious level almost. At some point. If you are to study yogic scriptures, if you are to look into this, and if one is to succeed, it's almost like, sattva is that what saves the day. Because there is this courting process. The body is constantly being prepared, made better as a vehicle of receptivity. So the body needs to be in that optimal state where quality of sattva dominates. Some rajas is there, yes. In some quality, movement is necessary. And an amount of tamas, tamaguna, because it's pertinent to our physiology. If not for tamaguna, we won't be able to walk, fly in the air. So, obviously, any medication is tamasic. So it suppresses the system. So therefore, choice is yours. You need to, at some point, there's a long-term goals, short-term goals. You need to make that decision based on very clear evaluation. Because you are still young man, right? Or maybe you look fantastic and I need to ask you on the side, what's the recipe? But to me you look young, okay? You shave you clean, right? Brush your hair, you pass for a very young man, that's all I'm saying. But the nervous system, you see, we don't get younger with age. This is another truth. It doesn't matter what we come up with, this, that, We can inject ourselves with as much collagen as we would like to, right? To remain plump and looking, But the time will take its toll anyway, because that's also natural. It's beautiful. See, look. It's seasonal. Seasonal. Age is also, it's like getting seasoned, like a good wine. It's a wonderful thing. But aging needs to be graceful, as they say. So anything that we put into our system, when our nervous system and our immune system is plumb, of course, will translate and later on. So therefore I mentioned long-term goals as well. So I don't know if you need further, if you need us to elaborate further, if there is something that clearly answered to your inquiry, has been answered. Is there other dilemma? Because you know that it's an interesting and complex question as well, right? What I also like, there's something came through in the way you put it through words, something which is relevant and pertinent to all of us. It's that you mentioned that dilemma between healthy life, right? Between living the so-called healthy life and spiritual life. It's a very important and interesting question. It's where the rubber hits the road, as they say. It's where the reality of this versus fantasy, and what spiritual processes also require and demand of us, and what toll it can take. So it's not just today. There is also, in the amount of all that is available, there is this kind of continuation of this rosy perspectives. That we can just use all this that is available, all that wisdom of the ages, all that wisdom of the millennia, of various cultures, to throw into that pot of that Silicon Valley, of that collagen, of that eternal youth, like into the eternity, You don't even need to die at that thing. You can live 300, 500 years. It's exciting, exhilarating, And I don't want to sound like this old man from China, speaking here, No, exhilarating. 300 years on now, I'm going to come back to Freiburg. All of you are gone. I'll still be teaching here, unless you crack the secret. How many will be there? Exhilarating, isn't it?
No, so that's deeply helpful, and the connection between Sattvic and Tamasic is something that I started to follow intuitively after hearing you speak to it some months ago. But my rational mind always kicks in and tries to out-justify. I do live in Silicon Valley, by the way, so it's very fitting. So just the one follow-up question would be, if I am going to really trust this regenerative process, when I do that, I get 3 to 4 months down the line, but then my rational mind kicks back in, and I just say, look, you have a biological deficiency and it wins the battle. What is your advice for really just persisting in this path and not giving in to the rationality?
Mm-hmm. My answer is quantum leap in understanding. Quantum leap in understanding. It's the same as we had exchanges yesterday, right? It's in the same way. It's the same. It may seem very different, but it's the same. It's the same. The change takes place only here. The only change is required fundamentally in the realignment of your thinking. Of course, it's easier said than done, and there are also catch-22 aspects, right? Because it's psychosomatic, but it's also somatopsychic, right? So it's one affects the other, and in turn affects itself through affecting the other. You see? So from that point of view, of course, what makes it difficult to apply is that in all sets of beliefs, it's like we set on the journey of something, any journey of discovery, any healing, self-healing journey, anything. And then it lasts a certain phase, that phase of excitement. If we're smart enough, we understand that everything has this cyclicity. Nothing can remain in the same way. Nothing. You cannot maintain that excitement of early phase where you embarked to the culminating phases where all the difference would be made. It's everything. It's with marriages like that. Partnership, any job we take, any completion of a project, anything. It's simply within the nature of things. It's the folk's wisdom, but behind it, of course, are the mechanics of how things are. Because that's also a ticking clock of that rotating cosmic wheel of energies. You see? Do you see what I'm trying to say? So yes, there is an hour of sattva, hour of rajas, and there is hour of tama, guna. And there is a phase as well. Therefore, many of you have heard me saying, whenever there is a phase where you feel you're making the most progress, ride that wave. Don't take it for granted. The greatest progress can be made in an extremely short period of time, because you'll come to the phase where things will feel stagnant. You see? Then you will have to lean only on that. You will not be able to kind of like enjoy that sort of Saturday night fever or, placid kind of balanced. No. It might feel as if things are daunting, things are not moving. It's within the cyclicity of things. The same can be applied to this process. the process of self-healing or reclaiming yourself. But quantum leap here represents departing from belief systems of sorts, or belief systems of kinds, to qualitatively different ones, so that you operate from a different level altogether. That, of course, requires the simultaneity of affairs. Therefore, this kind of workshop is a must for you. I'm not saying only this workshop, or only myself as a teacher. Don't get me wrong. You see, don't misread me here. But this kind of workshops, this kind of where consciousness is moved at a deep level, because that what can facilitate real, authentic shift in your perception, in the perceptual capacity of what's possible and what's not. You see? Because from that qualitatively new ground, it may throw, and most likely will, that doubt, that shadow of the doubt present itself. But it will no longer have the power of taking a grip on your decision making, because it's already by then exhausted its influence. You're already operating from a different level. See? I want everyone to remember this most beautiful line that belongs to my teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, which I cherish the most, because to me it's profound on every level, any level you interpret this line. And it's a very simple line that goes as, at any moment we shall be ready to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. When, it's such a beautiful reminder. A beautiful reminder. And please do look into this, how many levels there are, how many levels of wisdom, how applicable it is to every situation in our life, to the ultimate goal of life itself. So make that into that motto, because it is not essentially the quantum leap here. It's not that so-and-so is making this decision and therefore the biology takes over. It's a paradigm which is actually we're trying to overcome collectively. It's taking stand as consciousness. And from that place, taking that decision from the place of consciousness, consciously and from the place of consciousness. And there are no limitations in consciousness whatsoever, none. So the miracle here is a fact, it's a matter of what and how consciousness functions. Life is a miracle of consciousness. So why would consciousness hesitate to display its capacity in gazillion of moments and situations like this whenever it needs to? It would not, only on the account of that precise holographic, if you will, nature of how it self-reflects itself. If it conceives itself as the limited being, if it takes that stand, then of course it's already against all the limitations there are. It's already capitulated, it's already defeated itself into a corner. Why? Because it's consciousness itself, and there's nothing more powerful than consciousness. So therefore, the most dangerous thing, and the most frivolous thing, and the most silliest thing is thinking. Thinking. We think and we become. Therefore, I said that the first day when we sat down, then no, don't just dismiss what is being spoken. Who said that it's all about walking around blissed out? Yeah, I maybe said that, but I'm saying something else now. Not that it's not valid that first bliss, understanding will follow. But if understanding is not followed, let understanding proceed, because it's very important. Without understanding, we are constantly cornered, because there is no your or my understanding. Its consciousness continuously self-reflects, because consciousness seems to be object referral, but it's only self-referral. Therefore, this is the true algorithm. This is the true understanding of what is taking place. So therefore, whoever used to come to me and repeatedly, like this year, and then next year the same thing, and 2 years after the same thing, and 3 years after, it's like, poor little me, poor victim. Yeah, you are fantastic, because why? Consciousness reaffirms itself. It loves being a victim, revels in that. So don't tell me you're a victim. You're enjoying it deep down, secretly. There is this joy derived. Of course, it may seem lacking in compassion perspective, but at least it's true perspective. There's no other perspective. You see? Then we begin to lie. Then we begin to downgrade the perennial wisdom and make it into some mishmash on a horizontal level. Bandages, bandages, bandages. No, healing. Healing the wound, closing the wound, let the wound close. How many bandages can we apply to it? So, therefore, choice is yours. That is the most useful words that I can give you. Choice is yours. And in that choice, everything is. So make it.